Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Educator's Pride. Myself Dr. Savita Khatri. In my videos, I will teach about life sciences topics. In this video, I will discuss about transport across plasma membrane. So let's start with it. As we know, plasma membrane is a selectively permeable structure. About that, I have discussed in my previous video on plasma membrane. You will find the link of that video on plasma membrane at the end of this video. So, most biological molecules are unable to diffuse through the synthetic lipid bilayer, such as small non-polar molecules like oxygen, carbon dioxide diffuse rapidly across synthetic lipid bilayer. Small uncharged polar molecules such as water, urea, and glycerol also diffuse across a synthetic lipid bilayer. Large uncharged polar molecules don't diffuse across a synthetic lipid bilayer, and also same for ions, as shown in the figure. However, the plasma membrane, unlike synthetic lipid bilayer, allow the passage of large polar molecules such as ions, sugars, and amino acids, etc. Special classes of transport proteins like carrier and channel proteins are responsible for transferring such solutes across the cell membrane. Now, what are different types of transport across plasma membrane? Transport is of three types. First, passive transport. Passive transport is further divided into two types, diffusion and osmosis. Under diffusion category, there are two types of diffusion, simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Second is active transport. It is of two types, primary transport and secondary transport. Third is vesicular transport. It is also of two types, exocytosis and endocytosis. Before the discussion of different types of transport, let's know about transport proteins. The membrane proteins may act as transport proteins which help in transfer of molecules across the membrane. Transport proteins are of two types. First, carrier proteins, and second is channel proteins. Carrier proteins transport may be actively or passively, but channel proteins mediate transport across plasma membrane only passively. Channel proteins transport molecules much more quickly than do carrier proteins. Channel proteins are simple tunnels which are embedded into the cell membrane. There are basically three classes of carrier mediated transport that differ in the number of solutes transport and in which direction. These are uniporter, symporter, and antiporters. In uniporters, carrier proteins that transport single solid from one side of membrane to the other are called uniporters. Coupled transport involve either the simultaneous transfer of a second solute in the same direction called as symport or the transport of second solute in the opposite direction called as antiport. The passage of glucose, amino acids and other polar molecules through the cell membrane is mediated by carrier proteins in the cell membrane. For example, various carrier mediated system transporters are present at the intestinal, brush border and basolateral membrane for the absorption of specific ions and nutrients essential for the body. Now, the passive transport. Passive transport occurs along the concentration gradient and without the use of metabolic energy. So, passive transport is ATP independent transport. It is of two types. First, diffusion and second, osmosis. Diffusion is again of two types, that is simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. So, in simple diffusion, a molecule simply dissolves in the lipid bilayer and diffuse across it. No membrane proteins are involved in this process. The direction of transport is determined simply by the relative concentration of the molecule inside and outside of the cell. As shown in the figure, in simple diffusion, the rate of transport of any substance across lipid bilayer is proportional to its concentration gradient across the bilayer. For example, gases such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrophobic molecules and small polar but uncharged molecules such as water and ethanol are able to diffuse across the plasma membrane. Now, the facilitated diffusion. In facilitated diffusion, like simple diffusion, involve the transport of molecules in the direction determined by the relative concentration inside and outside of the cell. But the movement is mediated by transport protein called permease and is selective in nature. As shown in the previous figure, the rate of transport of the molecule across the membrane is greater in the facilitated diffusion as compared to simple diffusion. For example, polar and charged molecules such as carbohydrates, amino acids, nucleosides, and ions cross the lipid bilayer by facilitated diffusion. The facilitated diffusion are of two types, depends upon the type of transport protein. First, carrier protein mediated, and second is channel protein mediated. First is carrier proteins mediated transport. The carrier proteins, also called as transporters or permeases, they bind specific molecules non covalently to transport from one side to another side of the membrane. They undergo conformational changes after binding that allow the molecule to pass through the membrane and released on the other side. For example, glucose transporter or GLUT. This is a carrier protein which mediates the movement of glucose. There are various isoforms of glucose transporter family. For example, GLUT1 in erythrocyte, GLUT2 in liver, GLUT3 in brain, GLUT4 in skeletal muscle and adipose tissue, and GLUT5 in small intestine. Second example is chloride bicarbonate exchanger, also called as anion exchanger protein, which mediates the transport of two anions simultaneously. This exchanger in erythrocyte membrane allows the entry and exit of bicarbonate. For each bicarbonate ion that moves in one direction, one chloride ion moves in opposite direction. The exchange is electroneutral because of no net transfer of charge. Second is channel protein mediated transport. In channel protein mediated transport, channel proteins form open pores through the membrane, allowing the free diffusion of any molecule of the particular size and charge. The rate of diffusion is higher in this than those mediated by carrier proteins. Channel proteins involved in transport of inorganic ions are called ion channels. Most of the ion channels are not permanently open. Some channels open in response to change in membrane potential called as voltage gated channels. However, other channels open in response to the binding of ligands such as neurotransmitter called as ligand gated channels. Now, the osmosis. In osmosis, water tends to move across a semi-permeable membrane from a solution of low solute concentration to one of the high solute concentration. Osmosis is equivalent to diffusion of water. The osmotic pressure is required to stop the net flow of water across a membrane, separating solutions of different composition. The osmotic pressure depends upon the molar concentration of the solute. Many animal cells contain specialized water channels in their plasma membrane to facilitate osmotic flow called as aquaporins. For example, aquaporin 2 is present in the plasma membrane of kidney cells is essential for resorption of water from the foaming urine. Its absence leads to diabetes. This is all about passive transport. In the next video, I will discuss about active transport. If you liked my video, then please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon for more such videos. If you want handwritten notes on this topic, then write in the comment section. Thank you.